financial update, Mr. Harris and Mr. Broomfield.
You called it what, a trifecta or a hat trick, right?
Hat trick, yes,
Hat
sir.
trick, yes.
Or second encore, however you want to phrase it. So finance update, couple of goals for this part of the show. Mr. Broomfield will kick off with your annual reval briefing, kind of walk you through that. And then Mr. Hill will join me up at the table and walk through just sort of some budget updates, as we tend to do at all of your winter board meetings. Just kind of catch you up to speed on where we're at. But Mr. Bloomfield and his team have worked very hard to get to this point, just setting the stage for the community folks who might be tuning in. The county website, which lists all of the annual reval information, goes live tomorrow. So that tends to get a lot of traffic, a lot of interest. If you've never been there before, similar to the discussion on the regional website, it's a tremendous resource. There really is a lot of information about your particular parcel, lots and lots of stuff. So it's a good time of year to go check that out. But that's updated tomorrow. And then the individual notices, which are required to be mailed out by February 1st, are being mailed out over the course of this week. Obviously, there may be a little delay with some of the weather items, but those are in process. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Broomfield, who will walk you through some of the results for January the 1st of this year.
Welcome, Mr. Broomfield. It's good to see you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chair, board members, and Dr. Casey. I'm Mel Bloomfield, Director of Real Estate Assessments, and I come again to give a summary of the 2026 reassessment reval. Let me see here. Oh, that's not the right one.
You can go. Yeah.
There we go. All right. And just starting off, so as we do every year, I just want to start off with the state statute that requires what we do. State statute 58.13201 basically states that all property shall be assessed at 100% of the fair market value. That's the statute. That is the charge of what we're supposed to do every year. This year, I instructed my staff to have a starting sales assessment to sell ratio of 0.95, and more plainly means if a property is sold for $100,000, that assessment would be placed at about a $95,000 assessed value. That's that 0.95, getting us closer statistically to 100% sales ratio as required by the state statute. This year also, and I'll talk more about this later, is that there's also a coefficient of dispersion of that median assessment, 5.24%, and which actually is based on IWO standards, should be under 10.0 for any suburban market, and I'll talk a little more about that, what that statistic means. Assessments are not the leading indicator of market value. We follow the market. So if something happens today, tomorrow, it may not be reflected, it won't be reflected more likely in the current assessment for the 1/1 to 26. We only have one shot at the apple to get the assessment for that year. Whatever happens after that, it's in the analysis for the next year. The total reassessment, the total reassessment for this year is $69.5 billion, and split between residential agricultural at $54.9 billion, commercial industrial at $14.6 billion, for a total land increase for 2026 of $4.2 billion over last year's land book. That overall actually equates to about a 6.5% increase in land book value from last year, with the 4.65 of that being attributed to residential agricultural, and 1.85% of commercial industrial. And if you look at the slide shows comparison to last year to where we're at this year. For 26, we had 6.5% overall assessment. Last year was 6.54%. So relatively close, sliding just a tad bit. For residential agricultural, the total assessment, the median assessment for this year for residential properties is 4.65%. Last year was 5.01%. For 26, again, for commercial, industrial land, up is at 1.85%. For 25 was 1.53%. Just in comparison, the division between the total assessments of existing residential revaluation is at 4.55%. Last year was 5.11%. And the valuation for commercial valuation of the total is 6% for 26, and last year was 4.77%. I just want to make a note of that 6%, that ratio between the residential increase and the commercial increase. So as has been stated the last several years, we've made a concentrated effort to actually do a better job at moving commercial value valuation. So that's reflected in this particular, is where every year has been moving closer and closer and higher. And so that distribution of between residential valuation and commercial valuation, you see the reflection from year to year.
Mr. Bloomfield, just leave on that slide for just a second. So I think the message here is a couple of things. The box on the bottom in the middle, that's the one that kind of gets the most attention. So that's, what is happening with existing home values as compared to the previous year. So as we have been saying in this room as part of these briefings for really since last year, we expect that to continue to pull back to the long run average, which is sitting just a hair really under 3%. And so we see that, what we expected to happen pulls back, 50 basis points on that reval component. So when folks check their home prices, that's really what they're going to see reflected. That's an average. You all have seen the breakdown by districts, and it does vary depending on where you're in the county, but on average to 4.5%. But I think also interesting, if you look at that, the first box up there, the total change, a little bit less robust than it was the previous year, not a surprise, but the split between where the contributions are coming from is dramatically different. You'll continue to see that through the rest of the presentation with more and more contributions coming from the commercial side. And that's really a twofold effort, one of which is that leading edge of a lot of the major economic development initiatives that you all have announced over the course of the last several years. And we've said, that it takes time. These are massive projects. They don't happen overnight. They don't show up in Mr. Bloomfield's world the next day, but we are starting to see the leading edge of that. You'll see some exciting numbers on that here in just a slide or two. But it's also that concerted effort to go through and look at those land values in our major commercial corridors, and he'll show you the work they've done on that over the last year or so as well. But you see higher commercial revals, so existing commercial properties increased more than they did the previous year and increased considerably more than an average residential property did. And then you can see the percent attributed to overall commercial, that 30-plus basis points on that really is a noteworthy figure. So we're starting to see some of that balance come into this exercise that has been a long-stated county goal. And I think with all of the things that are in motion from an economic development perspective, you'll see a very similar result over the course of the next several years.
And just to piggyback off and to step back for a second in terms of the residential, I'm going to speak to residential folks real quickly. To also, there's a few factors that's also contributing to the sliding of the increase in residential properties, and it could be multiple things. Every year we start the assessments off doing a assessment to sell ratio, and this year we and what that means is that we take all sales that have happened and we do a median ratio study, assessment divided by the sale prices of every property, and this year we came in about 90. Which previous years they were starting in the 80s, which means if you go back to my example about $100,000 property, that means that those $100,000 sale prices were starting at about $84,000. Well, this year they were moving more toward 90, which is moving us closer toward the actual market value. Now that could be a number of reasons why. It could be one is that our assessments are getting closer to the market. The market is starting to slow a little as well. And so we're getting closer. So you'll see, as it happened over the last several years, is you're starting to see that median increase begin to drop down lower, as Matt had mentioned. And overall, So let's just talk about the overall increase in land book, the $4.25 billion increase from 25 to 26, and how that breaks down. In terms of the new construction and growth, which is about 25%, is 1.5 billion was contributed to the new construction and growth, leaving about 75%, a 3.1 billion attributed to revaluation of existing properties. 72% of the increase from residential and 28% of that attributed to commercial valuation growth. Those figures, if you look at both 26 and 25, once again, looking at the split of the value increase of 4.2 billion for existing residential versus commercial properties, it's a split of 72% of the total increase was attributed to residential increase, assessed property, and 28% was from commercial growth. It was outside of the new construction.
Again, just to add on to that, this, as we have said, many times, I think this is a much better measure of the ratio. The overall ratio is, sort of subject to the law of large numbers. It's going to take a long time to move that, but it's really about in any individual year, what is the proportionality of those relative contributions? And this year, you can see it, like Mr. Bloomfield said, almost 29% of the growth coming from the commercial piece, and just a touch over 70 from the residential. So the overall ratio, again, that's a long-term proposition. All that can be focused on from really y'all's perspective, from a strategic perspective, is how are we moving that needle in any 12-month period. And this period that Mr. Bloomfield is discussing, certainly the benefit of a lot of the commercial and economic development emphasis that we've had, when you can get almost 30% of that overall total coming from the commercial side, despite the fact that its overall composition, when you factor in everything, is closer to the 20.
And so we'll take a quick look at some of the commercial asset changes, and we're talking about it. And these are just some of all of the commercial asset increases. You see, I'm not going to read each and every one of them, but you'll see industrial manufacturing up about 15%. We take office warehousing up 17.5%. Office warehouse condos up 15%, so on and so forth. So that's where those increases are coming from. That helps with that 28% of the total increase.
And those figures on the screen are a combination of reval and construction. So that's new product that's coming online, being captured, as well as that effort where they go segment by segment through the commercial book and are checking those values. So when you see that overall increase, it's not that industrial flex buildings had an average increase in their value of 15.8. It's the overall increase in that segment from those two factors combined, if that makes sense.
And just to illustrate the two of the new construction increases, Matt talked about, these are the two major ones that is coming online. One is the Carissa data center with the value increase of $40.1 million, and the Lego, which is actually only a 30% valuation on that project in phase one. So that was a $210 million pickup on that prop as well. And there was multiple other properties we could have listed down, and multiple other things that are happening along the line. But those are two major ones that people have interest in. And
in a presentation where, and in a season really, where the numbers get very large and you kind of lose context of what all that means. So it's the Lego line, for example. Let's just focus on that. So that's a value increase on that Lego property from 12 months ago, a 30% partial. So I think that's, again, it's worth noting in and of itself that Mel staff on those kind of projects go out, even if it's not done, we're going out and trying to assign a value to the tremendous amount of work that has occurred. So in this instance, at Lego, which we've said is, when you went out there and broke ground, this is one of our largest projects ever. So that's a $210 million increase for a total value of $235 on a 30% completed structure complex, if you will. Makes that the second most valuable property in Chesterfield County as a 30% completed building. So I think that really kind of hopefully it gives you some sense of the scale and scope of the types of things that you all have been pursuing from an economic development perspective and the amount of benefit that they can bring to the bottom line. There is an economic development incentive package associated with that project, but that does not kick in until they receive CO. So all of the dollars from that assessment work from Mel and his team and Mr. Hart and his team to make all that possible, that will all flow to the bottom line for this upcoming year. So you've got just in 2 Meadowville projects, you have $250 million of new construction value falling to that bottom line, which going back a couple slides, when you see the overall increase is a 30% roughly contribution from the commercial sector. This is really what it's built on, these types of efforts that you have going on down in Meadowville. So again, a lot of that long-standing, decades-old work really starting to bear fruit.
And to just add, next slide, we're talking about, this is another undertaking that we did for the land. Over the last several years, we've made efforts to do all the major commercial corridors. And it's taken us a couple of years to get through every corridor, because to do a land study for each corridor. And so for this year, last year we did Route 10. The year before we did Midlothian Turnpike. This year we did Route 1 commercial corridor. As you see, there's a 37% increase just from the commercial land values up through there, which were depressed over the years, hadn't been moved in several years. So you can see where that value increase have come from. But those were just some efforts made for this year to have to deal with dealing with land valuations. We still have a couple corridors we need to go through, but this is the efforts that we're undertaking every year to try to deal with increasing land values across the locality. And being a large locality, it just takes time to get through each one. You have to step through each level to do land studies on each level to change all the valuations. So this year we did Route 1 as well. In terms of the residential distribution of the actual changes, increases, the median increase, as I mentioned, was 4.65%. Based on this chart, if we flip this over and we did a bell curve on this particular chart, the 92.5% of all sales, so all median increases fell within. If you recall, I mentioned about the coefficient dispersion. It fell within 4.65% of the median. The median was 6.45%. So if I go and do the distribution from 0 to 9%, 92.5% of all residential increases fell within that median increase of 4.65%. That's what the actual coefficient dispersion means. It's saying is that basically showing and illustrating how equitable the distribution of increases were among the residential properties. If anyone had interested in that, at a 4.65%, at 5% increase either way, you're going to fall between 0 and 9% increase for 92.5% of all properties. And at the end, I think that was pretty much the roughness. And just to add to is that the median sale price, and just going back to what I was saying about the actual valuation of properties, if you notice, is that at this point we have a median sale price increase from 24 to 25, only about $5,300. So that's showing a slowing of market value. Now, that could change in the summer months, but as of last year, the median sale price in Chesterfield County was $425,300.
Any questions on, so kind of a part two to Mel's presentation to this. I think this is probably a good place to kind of pause. And any questions on the results from your 26 reval?
Schneider.
So, in regards to the commercial corridors,
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping Hall Street will be soon.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Hall Street next year.
So also in collaboration with that, I'm wondering if there's an opportunity maybe for you guys to identify like properties that are not increasing in their value or have issues, that may be working with community enhancements on opportunities for CDGB grants, that they might go out and meet with them and stuff like that to see what they could do to increase their value of their properties, et cetera. That's just something that came into my mind when we were talking about it, but.
We could certainly, take a look at that as they're going through those corridor studies, which is a little, outside of what they normally do from a reval perspective. So yeah, that's a good point. We can get with Mr. Billingsley and have that conversation. Thank you.
Let me just make one quick comment, Ms. Schneider. When you're going through the whole street, just to protect you, Ms. Schneider, if there's anything that's happening when you go through that reevals that are way off what you expected, or there's a big change in any business along that corridor, that you let Ms. Schneider know, so that way you don't get sideswiped by someone coming out there. So just make sure that you're protecting her and making sure that if something's massive change, that you let them know. Let her know.
Sure.
Okay, Dr. Hilton.
Can we go back one more slide? So when we say negative 0.2, so did that change negatively? So it was assessed higher last year. Well, it assessed higher in 2024, and then the assessment went down in 2025.
Yes,
Okay.
it could have, and that could be for a number of reasons: fires, permit differences, changes in characteristics, updates, and things of that nature.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to make sure I understood that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Before I let Mr. Carroll speak, he's whispered to me, also for Mr. Carroll on Hall Street. So addendum on that too, making sure for both of them. So yes, Mr. Carroll.
Well, that's why I have a lot of construction going on. So, what portion of these increases were contributed, not from the residential side, but on the commercial industrial side, to some of the land purchases, large land purchases that took place last year, specifically from Google? I mean, they paid a lot of money for a lot of land.
Yeah.
And that's only an increase in value on those land properties. It doesn't actually take into consideration once they start any of that development as to what's going to happen with the value of that property in the future. But
Correct.
I'm just curious because I know there were 3 parcels, well, actually 2 big parcels that 2 sections of the county where purchases were made.
Right. Those 2 parcels that we talked about, I think in total probably 15 different transactions. So that was a challenge for us to combine, split, and combine. Right now, they're sitting at about $40 million for the 2 parcels right now, which will be also part of the other land study for industrial land as well, which Hall Street, along with industrial land, are the last 2 real studies that we have to go through. But overall, we did adjust those land values to at least be equitable with what the other land values are, because we have to keep them in an equitable situation for right now. Now, once you move everything more, then that'll go up as well.
Chair recognizes Mr. Engel.
So, I know you already stated these things, but we've had times in the past where maybe residential homes went up more than, say, apartments, and that's been very highlighted in the past.
Sure.
This year, apartments went up approximately 5.88%. Residential homes went up approximately 4.65%. So it reverses back and forth. Some years, it's just the way that you have to do your math by law. And some years, things go up a little more. Next year, maybe something else goes up a little bit more. But it's not something that's done on the backs of the apartment owners or residential homeowners in any given year. It's just the way that the numbers work. But I do think it's important because that's been highlighted in the past that the apartments got tax breaks. Well, the single family got increases. I wanted to make that point. We, as Mr. Harris pointed out, we've had that old 80-20 in Chesterfield where maybe Henrico's closer to a 70-30. But in the last 2 years, we moved from an 80-20 to a 79-21, which might not sound like a lot, but it really is a huge, with the math problem our equation, I don't know that it's a problem, but the math equation of the residential homes that have built up over the years, it's hard to overcome that value when we used to be more of a suburban go home to Chesterfield from your job, where now we're moving jobs into Chesterfield. So having that 79-21 is actually really a big deal within 2 years. And again, to Matt's point, when we're bringing in 83.43% new and commercial versus 75.57 in residential, it shows that we are making significant progress in it this year, as we did last year, and we expect to do for the next few years. And so just some of those narratives that have been out there in the past, we are certainly showing that there has been a return on investment in the projects that we've gone out and tried to incentivize to bring into the county, and that is going to pay off. There's going to be, to what Mr. Carroll likes to say, there's going to be a future board that's going to be really excited and happy with us for some of the decisions that we made, as we found ourselves happy with the decision that was made by previous boards in Meadowville, because they're starting to come to fruition now. So hopefully we will continue for many years to see that trend change, but this is really positive, especially for some of the negative narratives that have been put out there in the last couple of years about the direction the county's been going and the burden on and who's felt that burden. So thank you for this information.
Yeah, and to that point, Mr. Engel, we have Dave Good and his team, Jim McConnell, and some others are working on a blog that'll be put out along with the update of the county website that kind of, gives some of the story points that you heard here today. So we'll make sure that gets some traction. You've seen, it's the Axios and some of the others pick that information up. That's really become a big source for information. So that should be ready to be released by the end of the week to give that same narrative that you just walked through. So I appreciate that.
Chair recognizes Dr. Casey.
I just want to echo Mr. Engel's comments and appreciates, the facts that you bring behind them. I did want to also just enlighten, too, that there's different dynamics between different localities. Another locality of reference is heavily into the office space for commercial. We're into the manufacturing space, and it goes without saying the machinery and tools and other equipment that is in all of these facilities is actually not part of the real estate valuation. So from a 70-30 or 80-20, we get tremendous amounts of taxes in our commercial tax base outside of, quote unquote, the real property tax structure, for which, that is not Mr. Broomfield's business. That's through the Commissioner of Revenue's office. And the other just, sort of aspirational, when the 70-30 goals were initially illustrated many years ago from a planning tool, that was really the balance of a locality that was really heavily student-based. And, and again, you've been part of these exercises in the past where a generation ago, 2/3 of our households had school-age children, and now we're down to less than 3 out of 10 households with that same amount. So there may be a point in time that we have to recalibrate and say what is a true real property balance between residential, commercial, but we also may want to, be transparent and gross it up for the other things that are directly from the commercial tax base, such as machinery and tools, that are not represented on the residential side.
I just want to dispel one myth that's circulated in terms of the residential and multifamily. Multifamily in the last 5 years is up over 60% in the last 5 years. Multifamily valuation is predicated on the growth in rents because it's done on an income basis. If the rents begin to slow and the so overall expenses begin to rise, then you have to capitalize that rent, capitalize that end valuation, the NOI, in order to get the valuation. But just as if the residential was at the same level as apartments, that is not what has happened.
Mr. Bluefield, just a quick comment. If
Yes,
you
sir.
could go back and return to almost your initial slide, in that when a home is assessed, okay, we have the opportunity, we have the option to assess it at 100%, but we don't do that.
No.
Can you speak to that as to why we don't and how that benefits our citizens?
Yes. Well, from a statistical standpoint, it's hard to get every property at 100%. And if you try to shoot for 100% valuation on every single property, you're going to push many of them over that mark. So coming into the county in my first year for 22, I think we had a 14% overall increase, a double-digit increase. The next year should have been another 12% increase Well, we didn't go 12%. At the last in December, I moved that back into a single digit foothold, understanding that markets are cyclical. They may fall off. Didn't know exactly where the market was going to go to, so I left some valuation in the land book there for whatever may happen. That was my judgment at the time. No discussion. It was saying, hey, let's pull back. If the county did not need to be as aggressive on the land book, I was not aggressive on the land book. The next year, we did the same thing in terms of having a target ratio. When I got here, it was 98%. It was shooting for 98% every time. I backed that target ratio up to 95, and then I backed it up to 93, giving more space than the land book. If something should happen within the market changed, it would not put any pressure on this body as you were reducing tax rates, because it happens. If let me just say, if you reduce the tax rates lower and the land book goes off the cliff and then I have to go negative, all your efforts then go to waste. So I was being more conservative in that approach, along with several other things. I knew some things that I needed to do internally within the office and things I needed to fix and work on. Well, that just took time. So in order to make things work and make it more conservative for everyone, I never pushed the land book, have not been aggressive at all with the valuation of it, in spite of what people may say, because everyone has an opportunity to appeal their assessments. And since being here, we don't change very many. And if we change them, it's by very little amounts. It's probably we find some condition issues in the properties, because there's so much room left from assessment to valuation to actual market value. As I mentioned, we follow the market. And if I follow the market really tightly, we would probably be, this year would probably be even lower, but the intervening years would have been higher overall. So I'm just making those assessments in terms of overall how to approach it in terms of the overall county perspective and what you folks have that you have to make as well.
So just to follow up to make sure that folks understand. So you're going to be backing it off to 93% or the hope or something like that. Could this board say to you, make it 97?
No.
How come?
It's because my job is to be impartial. And respectfully, I'll say this. I don't think about the tax ramification. I think about in terms of how do I keep the land book fair and equitable for everyone. And so my job is to try to create a land book that is equitable as best I can make it, and then present it to you to be taxed, however you choose to do it. And if I start to think about in terms of people's taxes and how much it goes up, then I cease to be unbiased. Now I'm putting into my thinking, now I get to choose winners or losers, who I'm going to raise and who I'm not going to raise. You should always want somebody sitting in this chair to approach the job as fair-minded and unbiased as you can to approach it. My approach to moving it back was based on overall understanding cyclical markets and not knowing what was going to happen with the market, knowing the market was pretty hot. And every single year, from a political standpoint, whatever was happening, there was always a chance that valuation was going to stall out. So to stall out, then we may end up in a year or two where there may be no growth in the land book, which is much better than a negative land book.
Mr. Inkle.
So another way to say it is, you're making sure that whatever we appraise their house at, it will sell for at least that much, if not more.
Correct.
Whether it's a raising or a lowering market, you're always going to be erring to the side to make sure that the assessment that they have, they'll be able to sell their house for that amount of money.
Absolutely.
And that, I think, is the easiest way to say all of the nice, long way of what you said. But I think that's the most important thing, is we're not assessing your house for more than you can get for it in any given year. And you're taking those market conditions into consideration, where it's a really hot market and it might be cooling off, to make sure that that percentage is done in a way to continue to be fair, that they can get for their house what you have it assessed for.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Casey.
Okay.
And I'll just speak in the honor of a mass appraisal system. There are many people who, when they go to buy a house, go inside a house for things that we don't see that could adversely affect the sales price. Neighbors can affect the sales price. So his is a mass appraisal system. I just didn't want to get disclosed that everybody give us a call if they're not selling the house for the right amount of money that's assessed at. But having said that, what we have not lived through as a county since my tenure, but Mr. Harris was here in 2007, 2008, and I was elsewhere. This 5 to 7%, if you will, margin is a best practice in other counties I've worked in. And it does help a little bit when the markets go against you, that, there's nothing worse than having all of your properties during the initiation of a recession fall below market value, as far as sales price. And there have been times, and there'll be discussions in the future where what is the 12-month period you look back, because sometimes in the first 3 or 4 months of a good economy, you don't want those sales to influence what could be the tail end of a bad economy.
Yes, sir.
And that is wisdom that his office has, and we'll pay attention to these markets if and when we ever come across that again.
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Engel.
State that a little differently. In 2008, where recently we've had people say, you're over-assessing my value and just jacking up my taxes. In 2008, we were actually having people call and say, you're under-assessing my value and you're taking away my wealth because
Correct.
you're under-assessing. And what you're saying this whole time is, I'm trying to right assess so that regardless, the market conditions will keep you in the right place. And I'm not taking away your wealth, and I'm not artificially increasing your wealth.
Which was during that particular time that you talk about, Ms. Engel, that was a surprise to me, because all of our appeals were not about increases. It was exactly what you said. People said, hey, so no matter what you do, in what I do, so it's just about doing what is right. So I can't get caught up in how people feel one way or the other. I have to do what is right. So because that was a phenomenon that I had never experienced, where folks said, "Hey, now you're telling them the ramifications of no, I want it back to what it was." Well, lower it, you do get you don't pay as much as taxes. It didn't matter, because of the psychology at that time. People were losing money in 401ks, everything else. So the psychology, I believe, played a part in that. People felt that they were losing something. And assessments are not really based in that ideology. It's really just about fairness and taxation.
So, Mr. Chair, the second part of Mel's presentation, which we'll move through quickly and make sure to keep you guys on schedule, but we did have an internal audit took a look at sort of the best practices associated with the office. We certainly appreciate the opportunity to do that, and for Ms. Durden to review. And I think it was, I've talked to her, and she's perfectly comfortable with having this conversation here today, so she's signed off on everything that you're going to see. But we thought it was a good companion conversation with this revow exercise. So what they looked at was, is the office following the best practices as largely established by his professional organization? So Mr. Broomfield is going to walk you through what the results of that process were, and the paper, I think, is going to be discussed in depth at your audit and finance meeting in February, and will be publicly available. So everything that he's saying here will be part of that process. But again, I think as people are looking at that information tomorrow and they get that notice in the mail, I think it's a good backdrop to see, okay, how did they arrive at this? Are they following sort of those established processes? So Mr. Bloomfield is going to walk you through those results.
Yes, for our internal audit, and the purpose of the audit was to evaluate Chesterfield's residential and land use assessment practices. That was the charge by this body to the internal audit, and that's what they achieved. They benchmarked us against all the IWO standards in other localities, overall Virginia locality. And I think that they used 6 or 7 that responded to a survey that they sent them out. And the result, the objective was to compare processes, IWO best practices, which we follow, benchmark against similar localities, and the methods that they used were surveys, policy review, and a benchmark, as I mentioned. Out of those findings, 92% of what we do follows the selective practices of what's IWO practices based on what they've observed. From a residential standpoint, we are 90% in compliance versus our peers at 79% compliance. Land use, we're at 100% compliance versus our peers at 63% compliance. Overall findings of their findings. Our strengths was our comparative sales and compared to sales analysis, our annual recalibration evaluation models, our strong taxpayer communication and appeals process, our use of GIS in our camera systems, and the compliance with Virginia Code, which has a median ratio of 84.22%. The last strength was every year, the state of Virginia, Department of Taxation, does a mini ratio on every locality across the jurisdiction. And part of this it comes because of funding. And so they want to make certain that every locality is doing their best in order to assess their properties, in order to get whatever funding that they need from their locality first and then come to the state second. And so they do ratio studies every year, which is put out in a report. If anyone wants to go out and see it, you can go to Virginia Taxation website. They have our reports there for you can see every locality, what every locality's median ratios are for every year. And this is a median ratio which actually is at 84.22%, which again shows how not so aggressive the assessments are versus the actual market valuations. And they do a way of tailing a ratio study, but that is their results of that. And you can find that information out if you want to see more about us in comparison to other localities. Some are a little more aggressive, some are worse. But we tend to fall right where we need to fall. And the recommendations that were given was to pursue a certification of excellence by the IWO, which we were already in the process of doing when this came about. We were also in the process of updating our policies and procedures manual, which we were in the process again of updating because of our new camera system. So some of those processes are changing daily, and we've been working with our vendor to do some recalibration of our system. So those manuals were in process, are there, accessible, and improved the inspection cycle and mineral property appraisal compliance. And the improved inspection cycle, just to speak about that a little bit, IWO standards suggest that localities such as ours should have a inspection cycle where every property should be seen between every 4 and 6 years. We were trailing about 9 years to get to every property based on the size of my staffing size is what that's about. But we've come up with a plan to address that, which was already in play prior to the audit coming in place. And this body gave us some funding to go out and to do some things in order to address that issue, which was just something like, but most of these issues was already being worked on. So they just kind of brought forth what we were already doing. Now, if it came a year later, it would have been even better. But, be that as it may, the public at least has an understanding that we're following the best practices from a organizational standpoint, from an assessment standpoint versus our peers and according to our WO standards. I just wanted to have that point out. And that is all I have for this afternoon. If you have any questions.
Any questions, board? No? Well done. Thank you.
I got
Dr.
one.
Hilton.
I just want to take a moment just to say thank you for your orientation that you gave me. We've had a few sessions, and as a new board member, I feel that I'm not in any kind of competition with my colleagues here, but I do feel like I'm up to par with the way you explained it, and just want to take a moment just to say thank you for your time and explaining something that honestly is a little complicated. Being that you're kind of like a hybrid of a real estate appraiser and, a bunch of other things kind of put into one for your office. And, but you all really did a great job bringing me up to speed, and I feel comfortable with what you presented and the conversations that we've had. So just wanted to say publicly, thank you.
And just one last thing, and Matt mentioned early in the process, is that the assessment notices, the final notices will be put in the mail to at least delivered to USPS by today. And so now, whatever the length of time for them to get those out, that's because of the weather, but they at least have been delivered from our end, developed, delivered to USPS and in their possession to be able to deliver it out. However, if people are interested, they can always go on the website starting tomorrow to look at their assessments online, because they should show up tomorrow if there's not a glitch in the system, but they should show up tomorrow. And starting on February the 1st, they can begin to call our office if they have any issues, questions, if they want some clarification, they want to speak to an appraiser, we'll be available for the next 45 days to answer any question that they have. And then walk them through the process of appealing if that's what they choose to do. But we try our best to give them the information to at least massage their concerns about what the value of their property is based on the assessed values. And it's not always comfortable for folks to see increases, but as it is, my job is just about the valuation and the fairness of it.
Any other comments, board? No? Okay. Thank you so much. Hard work, man. You do it.
Now present Mr. Shane Hill. You've all been waiting for all afternoon, I understand, but Mr. Sturkin was a little bit under the weather, so Shane is going to fill in and do a fine job. But last chapter, your update from us is really kind of tying some of Mr. Bloomfield's commentary and just sort of a broader look at the economic landscape, and then setting up from a calendar perspective, our final slide, just kind of launching you into the rest of the budget season as we really, in earnest, begin in February when you start to see some budget work sessions. So I'll run through this quickly, but I think, as Mr. Bloomfield said, we're looking for that pivot point in the macro economy. Certainly, we feel like, based on the briefing that you just got, local residential real estate conditions continue to hold up pretty well, and that, fortunately for us, is the overwhelming majority of our revenue base, and we get locked in for the first 6 months of the fiscal year. So Mr. Hill has the unfortunate responsibility of that full revenue forecast, but he at least has 6 months of his largest revenue locked in based on what Mr. Bloomfield presented you today. So that's a good place to start. The rest of it, though, we are trying to have an understanding of what will happen a year from now, and then with all of the other pieces of the revenue mix. So we're just going to walk through a couple of economic slides that we tend to do at this time of year. And in audit finance, we can get into this a little bit more. This is looking at local construction trends. This is a year-over-year, 12-month moving average. So we're seeing a slowdown in building activity. So again, not any one of these slides is reason to, for alarm, but it's just we are sharing, as we always do, kind of what is on our radar screen. So we're seeing values hold up pretty well, but we're seeing construction activity, at least locally from a single family perspective, slow down a little bit compared to where we were a year ago. This is an interesting one. This is looking at components of the Chesterfield County labor force. So these are folks that live in the county. This is not necessarily work here, but it's a household survey. So it's administered nationally, of course, but looking at the components of all those in Chesterfield County that have a job. So what you're seeing is the change in those components, and the negative green that you see on the far right-hand side in the dashed box, that shows an actual decline in the number of employed individuals from the last piece of data that we have, and then the increase is from those that are actually unemployed. So you look back with the gray bars, if you kind of follow the trend across the page, those are recessions that are shaded, just to kind of give you a sense. So when you see that inversion where the number of employed, you see a decline, and then you see an increase in the number of unemployed, there is some correlation to those business cycle points that Mr. Bloomfield reference, and that's really what we chase in our business, is trying to identify where those pivot points are. So again, that doesn't mean that a recession of any kind is imminent, but it's certainly something that we keep an eye on, and it really colors how we build the proposed county administrator's proposed budget that you will see in early March with continued sort of conservative approach, I think, in terms of how we will do that. Again, it's a very similar measure here. This is looking at unemployment claims, noisier version on the left, on the right-hand side, kind of smoothed out. You see plotting continued claims over the course of the last several years. So a general trend that has that up, and the most recent several observations show a tick up. So again, some concerns, some very reflective of the national market, that there's some jitters, I think is probably the best word on the labor market side. Mr. Durkee made me leave this in here. If he's listening at home, I'm going to do the slide. He owes me $5, but this is sort of an obscure national measure. Same concept. The recessions are shaded in the gray bars, but this is looking at heavy truck sales, kind of a leading indicator. Dr. Casey's always kind of talking about those, he's a big proponent. So this is looking at, again, you think, well, why in the world are they showing me this? But it's companies making large outlays, and if they choose to kind of pull that back, that's a place where they can, make that truck last another year or two. But that it's over time, it's proven to be a very good measure of business cycle activity. So you see, again, the most recent observations, a pullback in sort of those heavy truck sales. Again, doesn't necessarily guarantee that anything is going to happen, but it does follow a similar pattern. This chart goes back many decades. So again, it just gives you, if nothing else, a sense of the depth and breadth of the types of indicators that the budget team looks at on an every day basis. And so I think this is another thing that we're keeping an eye on. Again, building you and bringing you a more conservative plan for FY27. And lastly, this one is really interesting, but this is looking at the equity market, so the stock market, and you're seeing various estimates of overvaluation. And you can see here in its current state, the value of the stock market more than 2x of annual GDP. So anytime that you have seen that happen, and this is, again, going back quite a while, you see those peaks, but it is something to be, something to be cognizant of, suggesting that, particularly when that magnificent 7 companies, there is a lot of concentration in those, and the overall valuation of the stock market does appear to be in a place that it hasn't been historically. This is, again, looking back a long time, but we're in excess of that 2 standard deviations of GDP. Again, just gives us a little bit of caution, pumping the brakes a little bit. So when you get into February, March, and you see what the expenditure recommendations are and the path forward, I think it will be rooted in some of this conservative, thinking that we're seeing in some of the underlying data. So on to the sort of a updated snapshot of the budget process itself. Mr. Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Again, this is just a little snapshot of where we are in the budget process. Again, very high level as we continue to move over the next couple of months. February tends to be a lot of heads down, late evenings and nights working on the county administrator's proposed budget. So we are still early in that cycle, but just giving you all an update on where we are. As Mr. Harris just mentioned, we are refining those major revenue forecasts through those lens of the prevailing economic headwinds that he just mentioned, some of those, as well as Mr. Broomfield's real estate assessment revals being one of our major resources, revenues for our county. Just again, refining those, working through that. On the operating side, over the last couple of months, departments had the opportunities to submit for additional funding requests on both operating and capital. We are continuing to vet those and go through those as best as we can. You can kind of see on the right side of the slide just a little summarized version of those operating and capital requests, just giving you the scope and breadth of those dollar amounts as well as the number of requests that we've received in the budget department. Moving more towards a more executive review of those requests. We're meeting with Dr. Casey with some of those key departments for those departments to meet one-on-one to go over those requests with him. But more so mentioning, we do this every year. I don't think it gets a lot of limelight, but before we even invest another dollar into the budget, we as our budget team are currently going through departments' line items, trying to find those efficiencies and existing resources that we can deploy before we add another dollar.
And just for some context here, this is similar to what you talked about, sort of the impartial process. We begin this back in the fall. We solicit sort of the needs as the departments see them. It's irrespective of resources that are available, so they submit that to us. So by no means are we suggesting that what you see on the two boxes on the right-hand side are all going to be incorporated into your FY27 budget. But we do publish, as you all are aware, every single request that comes in, we clean them up. But everything is ultimately published and everything is provided to the community, to you all, to make good decisions and make sure that the items that are recommended by the county administrator are the right items. So we're just kind of giving you, again, a sense of the requests that come in. To this point, Dr. Casey's meeting with departments on a daily basis, and we're going through and refining those. And we will now, in the process, now that we have Mr. Bloomfield's piece and the rest of Mr. Hill's revenue forecast, we layer that on top of these requests and see what can be accommodated. So that's kind of, again, the way the process rolls out. So we do have a number of requests that have come in, but all of these will not be accommodated. But they are good seeds for the out years of the 5-year plan, if that makes sense.
Yep. So kind of along those same lines, taking a more higher level step back, looking at the broader framework that guides our budget development process. We get all these requests. How can we incorporate those, if need be, into some of those priorities? Like Mr. Harris mentioned, while the economic conditions may not look like the prior years, I feel like these priorities you see on the screen are essentially the same that they've been for the last few years. There's nothing that's really changed in regards to the county's priority and your all's priority as the board. Education continues to be one of our largest recurring expenditure investments. Mr. Harris will go over that in a couple slides on the school's budget side of things, along with our ongoing focus of our workforce, maintaining those pay plans we've implemented over the last few years, investing in our employees however we can, as well as our facilities and our infrastructure, continuing those referendum projects that we've laid out, as well as dealing with some major maintenance. And then finally, just, a good thing to mention for the public as well is we review our annual financial policies annually during our budget process, really ensuring that our financial stewardship is solid and ground, which essentially, safeguards our quadruple AAA rating that Dr. Hilton mentioned earlier in the presentation. So again, nothing really different on the priorities front. We are still, moving forward with everything that we've done over the last couple of years.
So I know Mr. Engel loves the cadence of the process, but it is what it is. The school division is in a little bit of a pinch. As you know, they get their state portion of their budget early on I guess later on in December, and then they presented last Thursday. So they have Mr. Meister was there earlier. He has 30 days essentially with all of the cards available to put his plan together, which certainly is challenging. But I think they did a great job this year. This just highlights some of the items that Superintendent Murray unveiled last week. The highlights of the school proposed budget, the superintendent's proposed budget, and they are moving into their sort of town hall part of their phase. A 5% increase on average for teacher pay. So we've had taken a little bit of a step back in terms of our competitiveness in the region in terms of teacher pay. So that's a point of emphasis this year. Also looking at major maintenance. You all took, in partnership with the school board, really took a big swing at school bus funding back around Christmas. So we feel like we got a plan to put that on a sustainable path, and we're looking to do the same thing on major maintenance. We got some nice injections from some of the federal programs. We did a small debt program a number of years ago. Those are largely burning off, and we're looking for, how to pass that baton moving forward so that those major maintenance initiatives can continue. So that would be another major leg of their stool, if you will, for FY27. And then lastly, continuing to look at the execution of their referendum, inclusive of further development of plans for a daily Dale Elementary School was all discussed. So I think it's, again, a great budget. It's balanced. They are not coming back and looking at this point for any more local money. We'll have to see, like Natalie touched on earlier, what ultimately shows up in the state, but the $15 million that Mr. Hill referenced, and you see up here on the top of this chart to the right, that is, again, the foundation for what schools is able to do. They also got some relief in terms of their retirement rates. The other side of the coin of that, the valuation I showed you on the equity markets is the performance for retirement plans universally across the board has been very good. So they did get a little bit of savings because the valuation of the teacher plan is in a good spot. So that those rates which are set by VRS got pulled back. So that gave them a little bit of expenditure headroom. That plus some re-benchmarking success, as well as our $15 million, I think has placed schools in a very good position for FY27 at this juncture. Obviously, that could all change tomorrow as the General Assembly deliberations continue, but we feel very confident in our $15 million number. We will have them, as Mr. Hill will show you in just a minute, they will be part of your March work session to go through this in more detail. But I did, as we, again, put those puzzle pieces down for your upcoming budget, this is sort of the first big one, and I think it's a very big success, and certainly appreciate the partnership with Dr. Murray and his team.
So as Mr. Harris just mentioned, just a couple of key upcoming dates over the next couple of months as we move throughout the budget cycle. January, February timeframe, a lot of that is, schools and them going out and doing their community road shows and budget work sessions to ultimately give us their final budget come March. Again, we are working heads down as fast as quick as we can to meet that March 11th deadline for the county administrator's proposed budget to you all here in 502. Again, it's just some other key dates that are up there, as Natalie, Ms. Billman mentioned earlier, with the General Assembly adjourning late this year as the governor's proposed budget. And then moving into April, the beginning of April 8th, for you all to potentially adopt the 27 proposed budget. So again, just a lot of key dates there for you and the public as well as we move throughout this budget development process.
Ms. Schneider.
With schools being closed, they sent out a thing saying the 29th thing has been moved to February 9th, I believe. So just to give people more information.
Thank you for that.
That's sorry, we should have said that, but that's the end of our presentation. But again, you'll see this slide every month, but again, and we'll put this out on the website, but I think it is a handy resource to let people know, weather permitting, kind of how we expect the rest of the budget season to play out. So thanks for your time and attention.
Board, Dr. Hilton.
Hey, thank you so much for the presentation. On average, what's the percentage of the budget that actually goes to schools? I think it was like 46 or 47% on an annual basis.
Yes, sir. It's going to be right around that area. The broader measure for us is infrastructure, public safety, and schools. We try to get that as close to 75 to 76, 78% in any given year. So more than roughly 3/4 of your budget going to those three long-standing priorities, as Mr. Hill referenced.
Give me that one more time. You got schools,
public safety, education, and infrastructure, capital facilities.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Engel.
I was just going to piggyback off of what Dr. Hilton said. I believe schools is in the 40-something%. The funds, the state's formula says that the county should be funding approximately 36% of the school budget. And again, I think we are properly funding, but we are funding at a much higher amount than what the formula would say if the state was to follow their formula. So again, it shows that the county is right funding schools and the state continues to lag behind. Although they have taken a few bites at the apple, we appreciate those, and we hope that they continue to take some bigger bites this year. Thank you.
Mr. Carroll.
Thank you. Matt, there are some things, though, when you talk about schools, that we actually take care of from a ground maintenance point of view and from a field point of view that are not part of the school's budget. And a lot of the things that we've had to fix and I'm not knocking schools for this, but they just didn't have a capital improvement plan in place for outside facilities to keep up with some of the things that needed to be updated. You know, we had to do 3 tennis courts last year, which were a couple of $1 million, but 3 different schools. We had to do one in Cosby the year before. And all of that comes out of our side of the budget, stuff that we find a way to do. So although from a budgetary standpoint, it may only look like it's 46%, when you actually look at all the dollars that we end up spending, it's a little bit more than that. Is that an accurate statement?
Oh, yes, sir, absolutely. And I think to tie the meeting together nicely, the website that's up on Chesterfield.gov, or the portion of the website, covers a lot of those topics. You certainly pointed out a number of highlights, but there are an equal number of other things. The SRO program, we fund a portion of that. It goes on and on, but absolutely, that's why the formula numbers can be a little bit deceiving, because we definitely shoulder a lot of things that aren't included in that transfer. And we could, and there are localities that do that. They will transfer the full amount over and play sort of, silly games with the accounting part of it, but there are ramifications to that. We just don't. We can document those on the website, but to run those through a transfer just for the purposes to get a percentage up is not something that we would stand for.
Dr. Casey.
Just again, continuing and linking to the prior presentation, I do want to give Dr. Murray credit for presenting, a balanced budget to us. It does not mean that he did not have departmental wisdoms submitting requests similar to what you saw from our departments that are respected as far as what they quote unquote may feel like they can need to perform a service. But he did that exercise on his side of the shop than merely just passing over 100% of his departmental requests to our budget staff. And I'll credit board-to-board relationships between you and your colleagues and staff to staff. But again, Dr. Murray being the leader, that he balanced his budget and is achieving many good things with it. No different than hopefully we will be presenting a balanced budget, also with many good things, but with the full disclosure of what are other ideas of our respected leadership, ideally on both sides.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Carroll.
I certainly don't want anybody to think that I'm knocking the school system or knocking the budget that they're putting forward. But my point is that when we find inequities in the schools that need to be addressed, this board has repeatedly found a way to find funds to do it, whether it was during COVID, where we took ARPA dollars and put it towards HVAC systems and getting caught up on a lot of the CIP issues that were there with security systems, with protective barriers for the schools. Now, last year, we put funds to fund electronic weapons detection devices in all the schools. And so my point that I was trying to make is that there are other things that come up that we work very well with the school system to try and fix. And that's the point I want to make sure the community gets. I'm not knocking Dr. Murray. I think he's doing a great job. I think the school board's doing a great job. General Assembly needs to step up a little bit, but overall, I think everything's going well.
I just want to kind of add in that, at our last board meeting, someone stood up and said, well, you should just cut the budget on every single department somewhere between 3% and 5%. And that is a fundamental misunderstanding. That what's going on is that we are working hard to make sure that we continue to fundamentally, financially stay on top of what it means to run a county. And that is something that continues to be a misunderstanding, so that when things come up that we may not have expected, like what Ms. Stillman was talking about, is that all of a sudden we're on the hook for $40 million for something because of some legislation that came from the state, we're going to be prepared for that. And that is what is terrifying for us and for our community. So being able to say, well, there should just be a 3 to 5% cut across the board is something that is irresponsible. Is not something that we would do. Instead, what we do is we pay attention, as you said, Mr. Harris, is that you go through every single budget of every single department to make sure that when they are asking for something, and Mr. Hill said the same thing, that we're going ahead and just being careful as we move through it. That's what it means to be paying attention to dealing with the budget. I want to appreciate Mel's team. I want to appreciate your team, Ms. Strauss, for all the work that you do. It is a Herculean, what you all do is incredibly impressive, and I know a lot of that has to do with amazing staff. So thank you for being leaders for these two very important teams, these two very important departments. So thank you. And Dr. Hilton.
I just wanted just to note that, I got some fire numbers that said that, they're responding to, or they're forecasted to respond to like 20,000 new calls for service. So, I had the same discussion with the constituent about, cutting every department. I said, how can you cut the fire department if they're responding to more calls now? Well, they will be responding to more calls for service now, and they have been responding to more calls for service. How can you cut them? So it's kind of like you can't ask for people to do more with less when you're putting more on them, So we're a growing county, and I think it's important that constituents understand that in a growing county, there are going to have to be some growth in services. And so we just have to be smart about what we do financially, but also take into account of the growths that we're going to have in order to account for the new citizens that are moving here and paying taxes and that sort of thing. So, I appreciate your presentation, highlights a lot of those efforts, and just say thank you so much for what you do for us.